everyone, welcome back to my channel. It's been a bit of a while since I've posted a video on here because I've been a little bit busy, but I thought I would come in today and revisit the series that I was doing where I was painting botanicals out of an old book that I found in an op shop that has some beautiful pictures of flowers and shrubs in it. It's been a while since I've done one of these, and this time I thought I'd do something a little bit different, and instead of creating sort of a finished piece, I thought I'd just have a bit of fun with some mixed media and some art materials I don't use that often, like some brush pens and some inks. I have heaps of these sorts of materials laying around. Most of them have come from the Sketchbox subscription that I get each month, but I don't really use them as much as I want to use them, so this is a good excuse. So here's some of the products I'm going to be using today. So that's just a pigment liner. I've got a couple of brush pens, which are like water-based sort of ink pens, watercolor pens, and this one here, which is actually a Sennelier Ink Brush pen. I didn't actually use that one, but I do have some regular water-based inks as well. These are a few colours that I got in a Sketchbox recently, and I think later on I add in a pink and a blue as well, which a different brand, I don't remember. Anyway, I thought I would take a bit of a different approach this time, and instead of picking just one picture to work with, I thought I would choose a couple, because a lot of the pictures in this book are of flowers that are quite intricate and delicate, and they're quite small sort of groupings of flowers, and that would be really hard to sort of paint in one art piece. So I thought that I would go in a bit of a different direction and sort of work a bit more on ink and sort of pen drawing, and more of an illustrative approach rather than a finished sort of gouache or acrylic painting like I had done in the past. So yeah, that's what I'm going to be doing today. So this is just going to be a really sort of relaxed kind of watch me draw, watch me create a kind of a collage-y illustration type of thing with these materials. And I also thought that it would be good for me to chat to you about some other things while I'm drawing. So I did a bit of a call out on my Instagram, and I asked people to send me some questions that they'd like me to answer. So I'm going to go through some of the questions and answers now, and hopefully you guys will learn a little bit about me and my process and my opinion on art related matters. So yeah, sit back and enjoy. So the first question that was asked was in relation to using reference photos, specifically reference photos that were taken by other photographers, and whether you need to have permission from them, and what the kind of, the vibe is around that kind of situation. Images that you find online, can you use them for whatever you want? And that's a really good question. I don't actually use a lot of reference photos in my work in the way that some other artists use them. So I can kind of give you my opinion based on the way I use them. But, this is just my opinion. Generally speaking, when I do use a reference photo, I very rarely copy it exactly anyway. I tend to use them as starting points and idea generators. And then once I've done some sketches and some ideas based off that reference, I don't really look at the reference anymore. So I'm not one of those artists that will copy a reference exactly. And I think that's where the grey area is, because I know that there are artists out there, more sort of realism-based artists, that will see reference photos, and if your style is more realism-based and you are, copying that image exactly, then I think it's really important that you do make sure that the image that you're using is either a copyright-free image, a royalty-free image, or something that the original creator or photographer is happy for you to use. Because really, especially if you're using references that are not just snapshots, they're actually properly composed photographs done by a professional photographer, you know, those photographs, it has taken time and effort for that photographer to create that image. They have edited it, they have composed it, they have created it completely within themselves, and they probably won't appreciate it if an artist comes along, takes that image, paints it exactly the same, and then sells it. You can kind of see where that would be a bit of an issue. So in that regard, if you are painting in that realism style and you are wanting to use a reference image and recreate it, you know, fairly closely, then you definitely need to contact the photographer and track them down and make sure that they are happy for you to do that. On the other side of it, if you are creating artworks in more of an expressionist manner or more of a sort of semi-abstract kind of way, I don't think it's as important to give reference, because I mean, I know, for example, in my art, when I do use reference photos, the finished artwork will rarely look anything like the image. You know, if you put them up next to each other, you're probably not going to see much of a similarity, and I'm not trying to represent the images exactly. So in that way, it's more of an artistic kind of interpretation and not an exact copy. So although most of the images that I do use I get from royalty-free sites, or I take the photographs myself, I don't really need to worry about getting permission, because purely the way I paint, I don't really paint in a realistic kind of way. So I guess that's what you kind of need to keep in mind and think about yourself and the way that you paint and what you are wanting that reference for. And if you think that you sort of cross over into that area where you are going to be copying the image a lot more closely, then yes, I definitely recommend that you look into contacting the original photographer. You can see here that Luna decided to inspect my painting process. She's very sort of in your face when she wants pats. She will just come up and directly ask for pats, so she has no shame. So yeah, there she is. Anyway, another question that was asked was, how do you scan or photograph your artworks to then create prints and reproductions from them? And I'm always of the philosophy of making it as easy as possible for yourself and not complicating matters. If the artwork is around A4 size, I will actually scan it myself. I have a flatbed scanner. It's not an expensive one. It's just a Canon standard flatbed scanner printer. I will scan them as high as I can, which is about 450 pixels or DPI. And I will then put them into Photoshop and clean them up. That's if they're smaller artworks. For all of my larger paintings and my larger scale artworks, I do use a digital camera and I photograph them myself. I used to be a photographer. I was a professional photographer for about 7 years. So I do know quite a bit about natural lighting and editing of photos. So I do all that stuff myself. I will take the images with a digital camera. I actually have a Sony digital camera at the moment that I use. I used to have Canon cameras, but I sort of got rid of those when I was no longer interested in professional photography, and I downscaled it to a Sony. I can't remember the name of it. If I remember it, I'll put it on the screen. But that camera, it does everything for me that I need it to do. And yeah, so I'll just take the photos and I make sure that the lighting is sort of a nice flat lighting. Some people say that the best day to do it is like a really sunny day, but I disagree. I think the best day to do any kind of photography on your artwork is more of an overcast day, because you will get more of an even lighting. And as long as you've got your white balance correct, the colours will come out just as vibrant and accurate as they are in real life. Yeah, so that's the only real tip I can give you, is to make sure that when you are photographing them, there's no glare or shine on the paintings, and that it's nice flat even lighting. And just take the photo at the highest resolution that your camera is able to take it at. I then put them into Photoshop and I crop them and sharpen them, edit them, brighten them up, and then they're ready to go. So that's how I do it. I know there are companies out there that will scan the images for you. They've got quite big flatbed scanners, but I don't live anywhere near any place that does that. That's convenient for me to go to on a regular basis. It's just so much easier for me just to do that side of things myself, because, you know, I have the equipment and the ability, so I may as well just do it myself. So that's how I do it. Most places will, if your image is around about 6,000 pixels by 6,000 pixels at 300 dpi, you can get pretty much any size print you want out of that. The thing to keep in mind is, though, it's quite normal for prints to become a little bit hazy or fuzzy in the clarity the bigger they get, because of the viewing distance. You're not really supposed to view a large, you know, meter by meter print up close. It's meant to be viewed from about a meter or more away. So if there is a little bit of blur or haziness in the pixelization of the image as it gets blown up, the larger you blow it up, the less that's going to matter. I mean, if you think about billboards, for example, if you stand about a meter away or less from a billboard, the pixels on that billboard are massive. You know, that some of the dots are like, you know, a couple of centimeters round, but by the time you move a couple of meters away, which is where you're supposed to be viewing the billboard from, that pixelation goes away. It's the same sort of concept with prints. Up close, a really large print is going to have more visible pixelization. The further away you get, the sharper that image is going to get. So don't worry too much about the fact if your prints aren't, you know, fantastic quality. As long as they are at least 300 dpi and about 5,000 to 6,000 pixels in size, you can get a fairly decent size print out of that. And that's the minimum that most printing companies will accept. So yeah, and another thing I get asked a lot, which kind of spans from that, is how I get my prints made. And I've always used print-on-demand companies. I don't have piles and piles of prints in stock in my studio. I find that that's a really impractical way of going about producing prints. You don't need to do that. It's a waste of money, because you may have that stock sitting there for ages and you're never going to sell it. And so to print on demand means that you only order a print once the print is ordered by a customer. The only exception to this would be limited edition prints, which you have to physically sign and number. I don't do limited edition prints. All of my prints are open edition. So that means that I have all of my print resolution files ready to go. When someone orders a print from my website, I will then go to my supplier, order that print, have it shipped directly to the customer, and then it's all taken care of. So there's a lot of drop shipping companies around and a lot of high quality printing companies around that do this. So just search around in your area to find one. I use a combination of a local company, and I now have actually just reached out and started working with a company based in the US, because I do have a lot of US clients that purchase prints, and unfortunately, because I'm in Australia and they are over in the US, they would have to pay quite a bit for shipping. So I've now got in contact with a print-on-demand company based in the USA and also Canada. And so now I can have those prints shipped directly from the USA to my USA clients. So that has sort of cleared up that problem of shipping interstate, or it's not interstate, internationally. So depending on what your market is and where you're wanting to send your prints, have a bit of a look around and a shop around and find something that works for you. But that's the best way to do it, in my opinion. Yeah, you don't really need to be investing in piles and piles of prints in stock that you may or may not sell. Another question that was asked was in regards to art school and formal art training. Someone asked me if I have any formal art qualifications and art training, or am I self-taught, and what I think about art schools and whether I think it's worth it. And it's a bit of a combined answer for me, because I am a combination of self-taught and formal training. I did do a diploma of visual art many years ago. This was back in early 2000s, and I went from high school into doing that. But really, honestly, most of my artistic sort of skill building or learning has been self-taught. I've taught myself so much more than what I ever learned at art school. And so I'm of the opinion that if you are the type of person that is motivated and dedicated and able to, do your own research and learn at your own pace, then I don't think that you really need to go to art school. But it does also depend a lot on, what type of art you're wanting to produce. There is definitely a place for art schools that teach the old classical traditions of how to paint, oil paints with layers and glazings and the traditional way of drawing. Those skills are really, really important, and you can learn those on your own, but you'll probably get there a lot quicker if you go to art school. But if you're wanting to sort of do more expressive kind of art, really, I think you can learn just as much at home and learn just as much yourself. So I don't think it's really necessary in that way. It's a bit of a hard one. I mean, yeah, I did do art school, but even before I did art school, I kind of already knew a lot just based on what I'd learned myself. And since completing it, I've learned even more. The most important thing with art is to just keep practicing at it and keep giving yourself the time to do it. So yeah, that's kind of my opinion, I guess. But yeah, I mean, I sometimes have sort of younger people email me asking me this question as well, like they're finishing up on high school and they want to know whether it's worth doing an art degree. And I don't know, it's hard to sort of answer that, because for some people it might be fantastic, for others it might be pointless. It just depends on a lot of things. It depends on where you go, it depends on the teachers that you have and your own motivation and what you expect to get out of it. So I guess my advice would be just to make sure you research everything about what you're wanting to do. Things such as more, illustration and graphic design based work, I think that in that regard, where there's an industry that you will specifically be going into, I think that art schools and design schools are a lot more beneficial. But as a fine artist, I don't think it's really necessary. And that might be a bit of a controversial thing to say, but I think that in this day and age of the internet and how close the whole world is to each other now, I don't think it's really necessary. You don't have to have an art degree. You don't have to have a gallery representing you or critics and, fancy shows in order to be successful as an artist in this day and age. You can be very sort of self-motivated and do that all yourself. You can sell online without ever having to step into a gallery. So I think that the whole, art world has changed a lot in the last probably 20 or 30 years, and it's not quite as formal and scary and specifically niche as it used to be. So I guess that's my opinion on that. Another question that was asked was, this one actually came up twice. This was, how did you become a full-time artist? So this is probably a bit of a long story. I have been working full-time as a artist, supporting myself and my family financially since about 2013, 2014, something around that. And it was one of those things where I didn't really, decide one day, I'm going to be an artist now. It kind of just happened organically. As I mentioned, I did go to art school. When I completed art school, I went into the art diploma wanting to sort of focus more on painting. However, I sort of, after 2.5, actually I think I did it over 3, maybe 4 years, because I had my son after the first year and then took a year off and then came back, and then I had my daughter. So I had some kids in between finishing, but I went into it wanting to focus on painting and drawing, and I actually came out of it a photographer, which I didn't really expect. I wasn't remotely interested in photography beforehand, but I picked it up as a subject to sort of help with my painting, because I thought, hey, I need to learn how to take nice reference photos so I can use them for my own paintings. And I ended up really liking it and enjoying it, and I taught myself how to edit digitally. And I sort of came out of it and I started taking photos of my kids, and then taking photos of friends' kids. And before you knew it, I was getting, paid to take photos of people. So it kind of spiraled into this business of being a photographer. And so I spent quite a few years doing weddings, families, events, natural light photography, and that kind of thing. And during that time, I was still painting and drawing. I kind of got really heavily into the what's it called? I've even forgotten what it's called. Scrapbooking. Scrapbooking, that's what it was called. I was very heavily into scrapbooking, again, because that kind of went hand in hand with photography. And I had kids and I was wanting to capture the memories of when they were younger. So I was very into scrapbooking, and that's kind of where my creativity was going. But I was still, drawing and illustrating and messing around in my spare time. But with 2 young children, it wasn't really that easy. And I didn't have a lot of time to be creative in that way. So the painting and drawing things kind of went onto the side a little bit, and I kind of lost a bit of time and enthusiasm for it, and life got in the way. And then because of some personal circumstances, I decided not to do photography anymore. My marriage at the time sort of ended, and I lost my passion for photographing happy families and weddings, for obvious reasons that I won't get into. And anyway, I kind of, started to get back into painting and drawing for myself, and just to sort of give myself something else to think about and something else to do. It came easy to me. It has always come easy. I've always been a creative, artistic person. I started painting and drawing and creating when I was very young, and so I would just pick it up again quite easily when I wanted a bit of a break from everyday life and a bit of an escape. So I started doing that back when my youngest was born. I was pregnant with him when I separated from my husband, and so there's a whole 2-year period. It's very hazy. I don't remember much of what happened, but I kind of started picking it up around then. So this was like 2010, 2011. And I started just developing, this style of loose paintings. I was kind of doing more impressionism, still life type of work with oil and acrylic and some watercolor. And then I started to practice a bit with acrylic paint because I hadn't really used it much before. Before that, I was using mostly oil paints. And I started creating these really loose, flowy landscapes and these semi-abstract landscape paintings. And to begin with, it was just for fun. I put a few of them up on, opened up an Etsy store. I put a few up online, and some friends bought some, and some, strangers bought a few. And so I thought, this would be good if I can sell, a couple of these every now and then. And then around 2013, my mum, who is a ceramics artist, was having an exhibition, and she asked me to produce some artworks to accompany that exhibition, because the space that she had rented out was quite a large space. And so she said, oh look, there's plenty of space on the walls, why don't you make some larger scale artworks and pop them up on the walls, and we'll do a bit of a shared show. So I thought, okay, cool, I can do that. And so I sort of spent, I don't remember how long now, maybe 3 or 4 months, producing a collection of larger scale, semi-abstract kind of work. And this is where I sort of started doing these drippy trees with lots of patterns on them and colours and bright, happy, expressive work. And I put them all into this show, and I wasn't really expecting anything out of it, but I ended up selling a few, and that's when things just kind of happened on their own. Once I sold some, word got out, and I put them up on Facebook and Instagram, and I sold a few more. A local shop got in contact with me to have some in stock, and so I gave some to her wholesale. She sold them, people saw them and contacted me for more. I started doing commissions, so it spiraled out of, just that. It kind of just happened. So before I knew it, I was, going from selling no paintings at all, or one painting every couple of months, to selling 2 or 3 paintings a month, and then 2 or 3 paintings a week. And then I had to move into a studio because I didn't have enough space in the spare room that I was using. And I was getting more and more commissions. Some interior designers were contacting me. I started licensing my artwork as well through a company based in the UK called Bright Art Licensing. I approached them and I said, hey, this is my work, do you want to represent me? And they said, yeah, sure, we love it. And so that then started another line of work where I was producing things to be licensed for companies. And yeah, it kind of just happened like that. So as I said, there wasn't really a time where I went, hey, I'm going to try and do this. I was just doing it, and people liked it, so I kept doing it. And before I knew it, I was doing it full time. So I'm now been doing this full time for quite some time. And a few years after selling some work, I started teaching some workshops. at a few local art shops, and again, that was another thing that kind of just happened. Some people approached me asking for me to teach a workshop for them, and so I did, and then word got out to a couple of other people, and they're like, oh hey, come and teach for us too. And yeah, before I knew it, I was teaching workshops all over the place. So yeah, it's kind of funny how it just happened. It's, you know, but having said that, you know, I have put in quite a lot of work. Once I did realise that this was a thing that I could do and a way that, you know, I could make an income for myself, I did start to put in more effort advertising and promoting myself. I put in a lot of effort on Instagram, for example, and Facebook, and marketing myself. I would spend a lot of time promoting my work and, you know, getting it out there and approaching people and putting my work in galleries and shops just to get it out there. So there was a lot of work that I put in to do that. But at the same time, it was also a lot of luck involved too. And so that's about it. That's the story of how I became a full-time artist. And so that's what I'm doing now. So a couple of other questions I had was, let me just scroll through. Oh, there was one here about, do I prime my canvases myself, or do I buy canvases that are pre-primed? Generally, I just buy them pre-primed. It's just much easier. You can get pretty good quality canvases these days from a lot of places. Just depends on where you are. I'm in quite a rural area of Melbourne, and so I get a lot of my canvases delivered, and there's a few different places that I get them from. You just have to shop around and find some local companies that produce canvases and see what the best price and quality is for you and what you are using. But usually, I don't need to pre-prime them or anything. They come primed and stretched. I do have a roll of primed canvas as well in my studio. I do sell occasionally over large canvases overseas, and in order to ship them to America or Europe, I need to remove that canvas from the stretcher bars. I roll the canvas up and I ship it in a tube because it's a much safer way to ship the canvas. It's not going to get damaged. It's also a lot cheaper to send that sort of stuff overseas from Australia. So that leaves me with some empty stretcher bars lying around quite often. So I do have a roll of pre-primed canvas that's in my studio, and so if I have a spare stretcher that's no longer got a canvas on it, I will just restretch a new canvas and use it again. So I do use them a few times if I have them there. But generally speaking, I'll purchase them pre-stretched and pre-gessoed, ready to go. So I just take them out of the box and start painting. So if I'm doing a commission and the client wants a specific size, I'll get that size custom made. I've got a company that I can just contact and say, hey, I want it this size, and they'll make it that size. Otherwise, I'll just buy boxes of pre-made canvases in the sizes that I tend to sell the most of, and I just use it that way. So yeah, I don't work on canvas boards or anything like that. I prefer to work on the stretched canvas. I also don't really paint on loose canvas very often. I'd rather just paint on a stretched canvas and then remove it rather than paint on a loose canvas. I don't really have the space to sort of pin it up, and so that's what I do. And probably the last question I've got time for is a question regarding what my favourite colour combinations are. I don't know. I have so many colour combinations that I really love, so that's a bit hard, but I will mention the acrylic colours that I use the most of and the palette that I kind of stick to the most, and that is the palette that I tend to use a lot when I'm teaching, and especially if you see my Skillshare videos, you'll see that I talk about these colours quite a lot. That's phthalo blue, cadmium yellow and quinacridone magenta. those are my three primary colours. So if I'm talking about a primary palette, that's my primary palette. So it's a very bright, vibrant, modern primary palette, but they would be the colours that I use the most, and I sort of combine them to make every other colour. And yeah, in most of my Skillshare classes, I'll have a base of those three colours plus white, and that's what I use to create all the colour mixes that I do. But that being said, you know, as far as colour choices, I tend to sort of gravitate a bit more towards cooler colours, even though right now you can see that I'm painting this beautiful bright pink hibiscus. Generally speaking, I tend to prefer the greens and the blues and, you know, this sort of cooler palette and the cooler colours. I don't use orange and red very much at all. I do like, there's a bit of like an orangey sienna that I will sometimes use, but orange and yellow and red are not colours that feature prominently in any of my paintings, really. If anything, they'll be accent colours. I tend to sort of gravitate more towards the blues, greens, pinks, purples, those kinds of colours. And yeah, which is interesting though, because I actually, the colour that I'm drawn to when I'm in the shops, if I walk into like a home decorator shop or a clothing shop even, the first colour that I'm drawn to is mustard yellow, and my daughter will find that hilarious because whenever I, you know, anytime I see anything mustard, I'm like, oh, pretties. And so I'll always buy, like, my laptop sleeve cover is a mustard yellow colour. I've got several jumpers that are mustard yellow. I've got, you know, accessories at home that are mustard yellow. I love mustard yellow, but I hardly ever use it in my artwork. At most, it'll be a slight accent here and there, but really it's definitely not a dominant colour in my art. But it's a colour that I am drawn to and I love, which is really weird. So other colours that I'm drawn to would be like mint green, pastel sort of colours as well. I quite like those. And I don't tend to use a lot of those either. So yeah, it's weird. I don't really have a specific colour set that I just use all the time and I love. I want to experiment with colours, and I just use the colours that I feel suit the painting at the time and suit what I'm doing. And yeah, that's really how I think about it. I don't really think about it too much. I paint very intuitively a lot of the time. So as I'm working and as I'm layering colours and putting colours down, I'm sort of thinking, you know, what is going to go with this? What's going to highlight this? What's going to contrast with this? What's going to accent this? And then that will dictate the colour that I choose next. So that's how I kind of approach it, really. So I'm kind of coming to the end of this video now. You can see that I've just been randomly choosing flowers out of this book and collaging them in a way, collaging them in a painting way onto the pages where I think that they fit nicely. And I really wasn't thinking too much about composition or trying to make them all fit perfectly. I want it to be a bit of a random hodgepodge of shapes. And yeah, this way of painting was actually really relaxing and really fun. Like, it's very freeing, and I didn't really have to think about what I was doing too much. I just had fun playing with different materials. Like I said at the beginning, I don't usually use these brush markers and brush pens very much, and I should really, because I do enjoy using them, but I feel most comfortable with an actual brush in my hand, and so I find the brush pens a little bit too stiff, and I find it hard to be loose with them. So maybe that's why I don't use them as much. But yeah, I still really enjoyed it. And I've actually been using a fountain pen a lot lately, which is what I did a little bit of the blacker, darker details in. And the ink that I use in this fountain pen isn't waterproof though, so when I add water to it, it does bleed a little bit. But I actually really like that as well. I like that effect and that look that it had. So I think I might be using that a little bit more often as well, maybe in my sketchbook. Yeah, but I had a lot of fun doing this, and I hope you enjoyed watching it. So here we go with the satisfying tape peel, and I will be showing the details of these pieces. And yeah, I had a lot of fun answering these questions, and I think I might do this again because there's actually a couple of questions I didn't have time to answer. So yeah, if you have any questions that you want me to answer in another video, just pop them in the comments, and next time I do one of these, you know, watch me paint type videos, I'll have a chance to answer some more questions. But this is what the final paintings look like. They look a little bit dull as far as the colours go. The lighting wasn't great, so I think the colours are actually a little bit more vibrant in real life compared to what they look like here. But I really love the juxtaposition of the really fine lines and the thick lines and the more watery kind of painted effects with, you know, the darker details on top, and all the patterns all mixing and melding in together. Even though it looks quite chaotic, it really works, and it actually looks really pretty. It's almost like a really dense kind of bush of flowers that have, you know, gone crazy all over the place, and I really like the look of it. As I attempted to come in for some close-up detail shots, Luna decided that she would like to come and inspect what I was doing again and help me film this last little bit, because she's a sticky beak. Bean was sleeping on the bed at the moment, so that's why he doesn't feature at all in this video. He was fast asleep. So it's just got this little one. Anyway, from me and Luna, I hope that you enjoyed this video, and if you have any questions, yeah, leave a comment and let me know, and I will see you all next time.